Hey, everybody, welcome to Finding the Upside. If you've ever felt like you sit outside of the box of what's considered normal, good. Today, I'm bringing you a special episode on turning differences into strengths, and more importantly, how to change thinking to be inclusive of these differences and change the norm that boxes us into limited thinking and missing out on potential. First, neurodiversity coach Pasha Marlow gives us clear language and a big picture context for why teams and communities thrive and all brains are welcome. Then Coach Mandy Keene shows us how real change happens with two engines, commitment and compassion. And finally, Jane Carino and Annika Ahlstrom take us from breaking the stigma of ADHD in school to a thriving strengths-first career story. Stay with me. You're about to get vocabulary, validation, and a path forward. Let's get into it. I think people who may be listening may have heard some of these groups that this might impact, but with neurodiversity and like the way people learn, could you elaborate a little bit more about that and why that's so important to understand for us as a society as a whole?
Sure. So the neurodivergent umbrella, if you will, incorporates or encapsulates, however you want to say it, beyond ADHD and autism, which is kind of the common narrative, like, oh, we're just talking about people with ADHD and autism. But you can also put in dyslexia and mental health issues, and I believe trauma, and also traumatic brain injury and epilepsy, and even a lifetime practice of meditation, like anything that diverges us from the dominant normal way of thinking, quote unquote normal. And so that's a lot of people. I mean, trauma alone, like I'm just going to say that's all women or female identified humans, right? And anyone who's marginalized. So now we're really talking about understanding and supporting and accommodating an enormous amount of people who have been lacking in that support and are not thriving in at work and at home because of the lack of support. And so right now there's a really wonderful trend for companies to mindfully hire neurodivergent individuals, and that's fantastic. And they also need to keep them and promote them, by the way. And so that's part of my work, is offering neurodiversity affirming practices and attitudes into the workplace, but also at home, because I think a lot of times we can feel more aligned at work and more successful at work and more energized at work. And then at home, we often struggle. So that's where I blend my marriage and family therapy experience with the neurodivergent coaching.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And one of the things that I have always, as I've spent many, many years in leadership in a corporate environment and also in my own business. But that's one of the things that I've always embraced is, we don't want the same, right? We don't
Mhm.
want the same. All of the diversity, not just in all the things that are always been talked about, but in terms of the brain and how people think and how people look at things and how people process and just different types of brains offer all different kinds of unique and innovative ways of solving problems and bringing things to discussion that really help not only the team but the company themselves, and if we're talking about business. But if we look at that and expand that to society, we need that too.
Absolutely. Like we're
We
not
need
going to,
that too.
we can't fix our problems with the same tools we've been using, right?
No.
And so allowing people to lead who think differently, call it think outside the box or
Mhm,
creatively,
mhm,
or see patterns differently,
mhm.
patterns of objects or human behavior. Either it's really useful to our society to progress and expand. Absolutely.
Agreed, agreed. So, I'd love to hear, working as a neurodiversity coach, then what are some of the common challenges that neurodivergent individuals face when navigating societal expectations or norms? What are some examples of that?
I think every day there's a struggle with shame, self doubt, and imposter syndrome when we compare ourselves to societal norms or neurotypical norms, and we don't honor our own abilities or capacity. Because sometimes we can do a lot of things, but our energy levels or our chronic illness or our life circumstances don't allow, or it doesn't feel integrated and aligned. So knowing what our abilities and our capacities are, not comparing ourselves to other people's, I call it front stage, because if we compare ourselves to everything that happens in front of the curtain, that's not true or complete. And so realizing that we're not alone in struggling, and that it is very, I won't say normal, but common to wake up as if we've just returned to our original software and felt, confused and out of place, and we don't fit in, and we're alien, and we're having ruminating thoughts and intrusive thoughts, and we're feeling shame and imposter syndrome and doubt. And if we know that that is common to start the day that way, and that we build up from there with mindfulness or journaling or walking or connection or whatever tools you use, then we're going to release some of the shame of expectations of like, why is life so hard for me? Why have I not figured out how to adult or survive the day or thrive through the day?
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I know, I've had my own experience. My son has been diagnosed with ADHD, and what you just said, there's many times that he's expressed that. Why is everything so hard? And
Yes.
I think that people can feel very alone when they don't have that support or um, that environment, that safe space that embraces all of that. And I think I'd be curious. I know I have a bunch of questions I want to ask you about, bringing this into companies and things companies can do to change some of the work environment and culture to support this. But um, I'm interested to know if you think we've made progress there yet as a society,
In companies or in the stigma
in the
around.
stigma
Yeah.
around.
I think so. And actually, in the last 3 to 5 years, I've seen a lot of that stigma released. There's an interesting phenomenon over the last few years, thanks to a combination of finally research on girls and women and how that looks a lot different. That often girls and women are misdiagnosed and underdiagnosed. How it manifests in women is different. Research is coming out on that. The pandemic was an opportunity for some of us to all of a sudden come face to face with, oh, I have no structure. This is what happens. Oh, I'm working from home. This is what happens. Oh, my children are struggling and now they're 504s or IEPs. My goodness, that symptom list and trait list looks a lot like mine. Oh, maybe I'm neurodivergent too. There's that. And then, frankly, things like TikTok and social media just becoming a lot more visible about the experience, the lived experience of people with neurodivergent minds going on and saying, like, this is what it feels like every day. Those lived experiences have really translated into a sense of, I believe, belonging and less stigmatizing across the board. We have a long way to go still, but I really have felt a shift in the last few years. Yeah.
Well, that's really inspiring, and I feel a lot of hope with that because I know with my own experience just with my son, even in the education system, what that lack of that did to him, and I talk to a
Yes.
lot of parents who have that, and we're talking about a teen, but I think it's because it helps to shape and it's relatable for a lot of people of what that looks like. I think in my generation, maybe even in yours, there was no talk of ADHD. Like, who knows? I
Mm-mm.
may be and not be diagnosed. There may be many of us like that. Um, but like what you said about the pandemic, like, oh, I have no structure. Now look what happens. Like, and not understanding that until it happens, then you kind of see what that looks like and see what that experience is. But, I am an advocate and always, of course, advocated for my own child, but all children and adults that are put in a space that makes them feel like what they're doing isn't good just because it's different.
Exactly. And just thinking about your son at school or anyone who's listening, their children at school, let's say people with ADHD or autism specifically right now, just for ease of the conversation, have a lot of excess energy, could be internalized hyperactivity, internal, like ruminating thoughts, intrusive thoughts, spinning thoughts, or excess energy physically. So sitting still is not accommodating to a person or a child with that excess energy. And so the fact that we ask the kids to sit still without, whether it's, obviously everyone in school can't have a walking treadmill, but like a ball or fidget spinners or things like that's one way to accommodate. But then there's also the narrative out there of like, well, if you just do this for 21 or 30 days, you can create a habit. You can create a habit of bringing your pencil to school, of remembering to do your homework. That's not necessarily true for someone who struggles with executive functioning. I sometimes say I have zero habits, because if the definition of a habit is to do things over and over until it becomes involuntary without thought, I have zero habits. It's always a process. It's always decision making, thinking through consequences, thinking through all the dynamics of something. So if we know that we don't create habits and build habits like a neurotypical person would, then we could release ourselves from some of the shame and expectations around it. And if we could start to educate people on how different it is for a neurodivergent person, then we'll hopefully, come to more understanding on the whole. But there's some systems, unfortunately, like the education system, that's still, you know, maybe stuck in its older ways of thinking through things. And as younger people come into leadership, hopefully that will change.
That's true. That's very true, and there's a lot of hope for that. Um, I was thinking about asking this question later on, but I really love to get your take. I mean, one of the things that for me, that I've observed, and it's kind of this almost like different perspectives in our society right now. There's a lot of um I don't, I guess I'll say it that way, like poo-pooing of like DE and like inclusivity and that it's bad and all of these things. And I still think that we have enough voices, and as trends change and we evolve and grow, and as you said, the newer generations who have a better understanding and have been more exposed more to more information of what this looks like and acceptance and all of that. Why do some people change and when people don't? You said do the work. I know it may be very layered, but what's like the switch that has to click for that to start?
Oh, such a good question. Such a good I love that I get to geek out with you. So I would say, oh my gosh, this is where I want a whiteboard. But I would say it's two main things. One, it's first, it's a solid commitment to growth. Like it is
Mm,
a vow and a commitment to growth. And not everybody has that. It's a commitment to growth mindset. It
mm.
is I am willing to do what the Imagine Dragons song. I love this song. Whatever it
Yes,
takes.
whatever it takes. Yeah.
Right,
Hmm.
right. So it's like that commitment to grow. So that's number one and it's never ending and it's infinite. We're never
Hmm.
done. My mom used to say growing up, the top of one mountain is the bottom of the next,
Oh,
right?
that's good.
So that's number one. The second thing, and this is why I talk about this so much, is the second thing, and this is what I see missing so much in our culture, and this is what's missing so much in coaching, and this is what I teach my coaches because this is what I see missing so much in the coaching culture. The second thing that is required, not like a nice thing, but required is compassion.
Mm.
Because the reason why compassion is required is I got to quote one of my mentors. His name is A.H. Almas. He says, unless compassion, it's impossible to see the truth unless compassion is present. So what the heck does that mean? That sounds really beautiful, Mandy, but break it down. What the heck does that
Yeah.
mean? So in order to grow, we need to see things about ourselves, like you said, right? We need to recognize things about ourselves. I'll give you a personal example. So for me, I've struggled with boundaries. One of the reasons why I've learned about my migraines is that they've been linked to my codependency issues, which is linked to me saying yes to things
Mhm.
when I really want to say no. So, what's that about? What was the hard truth that Mandy had to realize, that painful truth? Gloria Steinem said, "The truth shall set you free. Of
Mm.
course, it's going to piss you off."
Yeah,
So, we
so true.
first, so the truth that I had to realize is that the reason why I struggled so much with boundaries and the reason why I was having such a hard time saying no to the people in my life was because I didn't believe that I was worthy of love. I didn't believe I was worthy of setting those boundaries. Oh, ouch.
Mhm.
That's an ugly, that's not comfortable. That's sticky. That's yucky. That's like that hot lava you don't want to experience. But I had to face that. Now, how did I face that? How did I let myself feel that and recognize that? Was because I had compassion for that Mandy. Oh, no wonder. Of course you thought that, because look at your childhood. Look at how you were raised. Oh, no wonder. I was able to have compassion for myself. So because I was able to have compassion for myself, I was able to see that ugly, painful truth. So we all have these like ugly, icky, yucky, painful truths that we don't want to look at, that we drink alcohol, we smoke weed, we play
Yeah.
video games. We like I have zero judgment. Like we numb, we escape. We have the best culture for distraction, right?
Yeah.
We do
Mhm.
everything not to feel the pain. Yet
Yeah.
the pain is actually our friend. The pain is actually the key to our liberation. The pain is like, oh my gosh, if we could let ourselves feel, if we could let ourselves cry and get pissed off, the other side is glory. The other side is liberation. The other side is like amazing. But the reason why so many of us can't go through the pain is because we lack compassion. We lack compassion for ourselves. Like compassion is like the epidural. It's oh, once we have the compassion, okay, I can have this baby. Oh, I can see this truth. Oh, I can go through this. And so if we're able to offer compassion for each other, if we're able to offer compassion for ourselves, and then it's okay, this is a really painful truth, but I can go through it now. Does that make sense?
Totally. And what's so interesting as you were sharing that is that I think a lot of people, I was just reflecting, obviously, I've been exposed to this and understanding this myself. And we've had conversations about this, but the self compassion is such a, I think it's like another step in compassion because some people, not all people, but some people can get, okay, I can have compassion for others. I think in our society, there's a lot of people that don't have that gene at all or whatever is happening that they're able to get there. But people can get to the oh, I have compassion for this person, but self-compassion, it's really being able to remove that beating yourself up, right? It's being able to remove that judgment on yourself. And that's next level compassion. And a lot of people can't get to that place. How, and I obviously I know it takes work, but how do you help people get to that next step?
Oh, such a good question. And it's really simple. I love that you say that because you're so right. It really is. I think in a way it's beautiful if you look at it that I know for myself, it's so much easier for me to have compassion for you, Maria. It's a lot
Hmm.
harder for me to have compassion for Mandy. Like I can
Yeah.
kick Mandy's butt.
Yeah.
I would
Hmm.
never do that to you. And so it is part of our healing and our work. So it's very, I share with my clients and my friends, it's so normal that that's harder. Part of having more self-compassion in a very simple way, and this is something that I love and I'm so passionate about, is to tell your story. This is why support groups are very healing. So Brene Brown, my future bestie, Brene Brown, just gonna put it
Yeah.
out there.
Me too.
Maria, let's hang out with Brene Brown.
Yeah.
So Brene Brown, she says that shame needs three ingredients to live. It needs secrecy, silence, and judgment. So if we want to have compassion, we need to start talking about it. So if you look at 12-step programs, or you look at support groups, and you look at how are they been effective? They've been effective because people are sharing their story. So if you have an area of your life that you lack compassion in, I guarantee you it's because you're not talking about it. You're not sharing the story. if you got into a support group, or if you got a coach or a therapist, if you shared with a trusted friend, hey, I've been going through this, that shame would be lifted. If you were like, God, I'm so embarrassed, I filed bankruptcy. I'm so embarrassed, I'm considering divorce. I'm so embarrassed, I don't know how to handle this with my child. You don't know how many, I don't have children of my own, but you don't know how many
Mhm.
parents I coach where they have so much shame around parenting their children. I'm like, yo, there's a reason why I didn't have any. That's hard. It's hard.
Mhm.
And I don't know any parent that doesn't struggle, especially now. And I'm like, you guys should all get together and just
Right.
share, hey, this is really hard. So part of the self-compassion, it really comes from sharing your story with other people who are safe and other people who can validate your pain and validate and hear you and see you and understand you. And that's part of the medicine. That's part of, okay, now I'm going to start being kind to myself. The worst place you can stay is like in between your ears by yourself. That's why isolation is so dangerous.
Yeah.
That's why solitary confinement in prisons is one of the worst things you can do psychologically to us human beings,
Mm-hmm.
because we're not involved enough. Unless you're an enlightened master, right? Hashtag goals. Unless you're an
Mm-hmm.
enlightened master, maybe the Dalai Lama would be okay in
Yeah.
solitary confinement. But you
Yeah.
put any of us in solitary confinement, that's no bueno.
Yeah. Wow, that's just as you were explaining that and as you were sharing that, I've seen so many places where there's this gap for this psychological safe spaces. And even like in workplaces now, they're talking about that. God, having these psychological safe spaces for people to be able to open and remove the shame and guilt, even about things like I'm dyslexic or whatever in the workplace or whatever the situation is. But what's coming to me is it's so simple in so many different places that it's like the cure and the medicine is exactly the same in all these things that are happening in our society with everything. It's if we could only have that compassion in all places, if we could only provide that safe space for people to be able to tell their story without the shame, because it's almost not having the safe space is why people put up that wall, why people put up that, I don't want anybody to know.
Exactly.
And that just came so clear to me, which sounds so stupid because it's so simple, but we have such a hard time doing that.
The truth is simple. The truth is
Yeah.
simple. You think of Leonardo da Vinci. Do you know that still today, Leonardo da Vinci has the most famous artwork like of all time? There's no competition of the Mona Lisa.
Yeah.
It's no contest. And
Yeah.
Leonardo da Vinci said, the ultimate sophistication lies in simplicity. The truth is always simple.
Yeah.
It's our egoic minds that always try to
Mm.
complicate things. That's why, like, when I teach coaches, so I've got my own framework that I teach coaches. It's called the strawberry shift. I got a strawberry tattoo. You see it? Like it?
I love it. Shit.
It's called
Okay.
it's called the strawberry shift. And I called it the strawberry shift because strawberries symbolize, and this is going to sound like grandiose, but hear me out. Strawberries symbolize the zeal of God. Whoa. So
Oh,
what does that
yeah.
mean? It means enthusiasm for love. So what does that mean? Enthusiasm for love. The reason why so many of us are in pain is because we forgot how to love each other. It's so simple,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like the coaching industry got so complicated and everybody just got so stuck up here. And I
Mm-hmm.
realized, Maria, what's the big difference between what I do and what so many other coaches do? I love my clients with enthusiasm. That's it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not afraid to love them with enthusiasm.
Yeah.
So many people, they're afraid to love. And part of that wall, like you talked about, part of the reason why people are so terrified is because of trauma.
Yeah.
It's because it's a survival response. And so this is why it's so important. And this is why one of the kindest things and one of the most great.
If you could start out telling me What were some of the biggest challenges that you faced in school with ADHD, and why do you think that still exists today for so many students, from your perspective?
So I would say, well, for me personally, there's a lot of different symptoms and things that kind of come with having ADHD. And to my luck, I have all of them. One of the funny things I feel like about ADHD that I've heard people talk about is, this is so silly, but I've heard people say there's the girl ADHD and the boy ADHD. So girls with ADHD tend to be illustrated as just kind of having their head in the clouds, staring out the window, maybe a little bit chatty, while boys with ADHD tend to be illustrated as hyperactive and troublemakers and that kind of thing. And I actually have kind of all of those things. So throughout school, I really never fit into the mold. Teachers never really knew what to do with me. I had struggle with academics. I had issues, behavior, and overall focus was something that I really struggled with, whether that was in the classroom or at home. And mainly what I think really bothered me was the isolation. And I think a lot of people with ADHD who have been through the school system in America can at least relate to this, but it is very isolating because whether you're being pulled out of class for something, or I used to have teachers who would, when I was not paying attention or getting too chatty, they would just send me out in the hallway to just stand there. And it was embarrassing, and it's also in a place where we're supposed to be encouraged to learn and socialize. It was just a very isolating experience. And I was pegged as lazy or troublemaker or I didn't care, and I didn't feel like I was any of those things. So it kind of, I was constantly struggling with, people telling me I was one way, but I didn't really feel like that's who I really was on the inside.
It's very, first of all, I want to respond to a couple of things, and I want to ask Annika a follow-up question about that. It's interesting, I had never thought of what you had just said about characterizing girly ADHD and boy ADHD, and how that in itself is an issue, because, again, we're now taking something and then making it, okay, it's this or that. It's not all the time, right? And I can see how that would be even more troubling in a classroom environment, because as a student feeling that way and them not knowing what to do with you, even what they did do for girls or boys wasn't always appropriate, and probably still isn't. But why is it characterized like that? Because all of us are just different, But Annika, I would love for you to share, what Jane describes. How common is that? And the people that you work with, or when you worked in, because Annika, those of you who have met Annika before, or listened, or don't know, Annika worked in a school for support for all types of learning challenges and diagnoses, and ADHD being one of them. What is that common, what she described? And what is your take on why that's not changing in education?
So first of all, I have to say, my heart breaks for you.
Me too, Jane.
And my heart breaks for every young person or older person, quite frankly, who has gone through what you described. And it's exactly, it takes me back to so many students who I witnessed went through similar situations that you describe, and it's heartbreaking, and it's shaming. And it's, like you said, it devalues you. Your self-esteem just takes a hit after hit. I've read somewhere that, by the time a child who has ADHD is 10 years old, they've heard 10,000 negative comments, specifically about their executive functioning in school. And, it's tough enough to be a kid, and now you've got that, right? So I think it's very common when you describe, but every situation, every person is so unique. So every time I meet a person who has gone through a similar situation, I just listen, because I feel like the first thing I want them to know is that I don't know their story. Just because I know some situations and have witnessed many people go through this, I don't know their specific situation. And until I really listen and hear them, I don't know their journey. And so a big part of connecting for me is listening at first. Why is it still this way? Because I don't think there's enough education for teachers and educators
100%.
out there. They really don't understand. And I think that some schools are so large and there's turnover, and it's heartbreaking because I feel like there needs to be more education, there needs to be more resources, and just more understanding of what ADHD is. And even listening to you say girls and boys, it's different. Like, no, it's different for every individual.
We're all individuals.
And we need to respect every individual and listen to every person's story so that we can help them and so that we can find that connection, because learning is difficult in the environments that we have. So
thank you for that. Well, that's the other thing too, is that I think part of changing this and putting positive messages out is the education, and that's part of what we're all trying to do here, is really put some understanding and give some perspective that is different, because the more people can hear your story or somebody else's story and what the struggles are and what would work better, perhaps, from your perspective, the more that there can be some more understanding about how to change all that. We won't get into, there's lots of bureaucracy in the school system and so on, but really, I think this goes in our society as well, right? Because what happens in a container then spreads to society as well, and if society doesn't understand it, then it's out there even when you're out of school. It's in the workplace, it's in, and that's varying degrees. So I think that's what our intention is here. So I would like to pivot, and maybe we'll go back to this later. Can you talk about, because I know a big part of what we chatted about was your feeling like when you were in school and all the struggles and challenges that you faced, and you persevered, by the way. So because anybody would give up, right? Given that. So that's a big part of this is to know that you get to the other side of something and it may change, and that is your story. But what was the specific things that you thought about your future? And could you take us through that journey when you were about to graduate college and you were looking for a job or thinking about, what am I going to do when I get done with school? Talk to me about how you characterized that and some of the fears you had, and then how you kind of were able to discover something different.
Well, it's kind of an interesting question. I feel like I've heard other neurodivergent people say this, where sometimes when you are growing up as a neurodivergent person with whatever you are struggling with, sometimes it can be really hard to visualize a future at all. So I kind of never really knew what was going to happen. Through high school, I never knew what college I wanted to go to, because it just didn't seem like it didn't seem within reach to me. And then in college, I couldn't really picture where I would be after college, because it was just kind of, it never felt like something that was for me. Like my whole life, things kind of felt like they were built for other people. And so whether that was college or a career, I had those similar feelings there. But I have a lot of perseverance, and I'm kind of hard-headed, and I think growing up with these struggles kind of instills that feeling in you, because you have a little bit of a chip on your shoulder and you want to prove people wrong. So as we were talking about the other night, my mindset after college kind of turned into, I need to start playing into my strengths. And when you are diagnosed with ADHD, you know, you're constantly told all the negative things about yourself and all the ways you're going to struggle and all the ways you're not going to fit in with regular people. So I kind of just decided, okay, well, I do have kind of like a toolbox full of strengths that I think, you know, people without ADHD might not even have or be able to understand. And if I can take those things and lean into them more, I can actually use them to my advantage, which is how I found my current job.